The alien demanded war, then the human promised annihilation. HFY In the year 2147, Earth was not the same place it had been centuries before. Humanity had grown smarter, stronger, and more advanced. Space travel was no longer a dream, but something people did every day. Rockets flew to distant moons, scientists studied faraway planets, and colonies thrived on Mars. It seemed like humans were ready for anything, but nothing could have prepared them for what happened on a quiet Tuesday morning in Nevada. It started with a strange light in the sky. At first, people thought it was just another satellite, or maybe a meteor falling toward Earth. But as the light grew brighter and closer, it became clear that this was something else entirely. The object descended quickly, leaving trails of fire behind it. When it finally landed, it shook the ground so hard that people miles away felt the tremor. The crash site was deep in the desert, far from any city. Within minutes, military vehicles rolled in, kicking up clouds of dust. Soldiers surrounded the area, their guns pointed at the mysterious object. Scientists followed close behind, carrying equipment to study whatever had come down from the stars. Everyone was nervous, unsure if they should expect danger or discovery. Ethan Carter stood near the edge of the group. He was young, barely 30, but already an officer in the United States military. His uniform was crisp, his boots polished, and his expression calm. On the outside, he looked confident, but inside, his mind raced with questions. What was this thing? Where did it come from? And most importantly, why was it here? The object itself was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It wasn't a typical spaceship like the ones in movies. It didn't look like metal or rock. Instead, its surface shimmered and shifted, almost as if it were alive. The sunlight reflected off it in strange patterns, making it hard to look at for too long. There were symbols etched into the side, glowing faintly in colors that no one could name. They weren't letters or numbers. They were shapes that seemed to twist and turn when you stared at them. Dr. Laura Bennett, a scientist who specialized in alien languages, stepped forward cautiously. She held a scanner in one hand and a notebook in the other. Her brow furrowed as she tried to make sense of the symbols. This doesn't match anything we've encountered before, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. It's completely foreign. Before anyone could respond, the ship began to change. A section of its surface slid open silently, revealing a dark opening. Everyone froze, their weapons raised higher. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. Then, something stepped out at first glance. It looked humanoid, but only vaguely. It was tall, much taller than any human, with long limbs that moved gracefully despite their size. Its skin, or whatever covered its body, was smooth and metallic, catching the light in odd ways. But the most striking feature was its eyes. They glowed with an intense, unnatural light, seeming to pierce through everyone around it. Just looking at those eyes made Ethan feel exposed, as though the creature could see right into his soul. For a moment, there was silence. Then the being spoke. Its voice didn't come from its mouth, at least, not in the way human voices did. Instead, words filled the air around them, loud and clear, without any sound waves or vibration. Everyone heard it at once, regardless of where they stood. The message was simple, yet terrifying. War. That single word hung in the air, heavier than anything Ethan had ever experienced. War. What did it mean by war? Was it offering help? Or was it issuing a challenge? Nobody moved. Nobody dared to breathe. Finally, Ethan took a step forward. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay steady. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice firm despite the fear coursing through him. "What do you want?" The creature tilted its head, studying him as though it found him curious. "I am Zoroth," it replied. Again, the voice came from nowhere and everywhere all at once. I represent the Zyran Collective. We seek worthy adversaries. You will provide war. Ethan blinked, trying to process what he'd just heard. Adversaries. Worthy. None of it made sense. Why would you come here just to ask for war? He demanded, his tone sharper now. We don't even know who you are. Zoreth's glowing eyes narrowed slightly. Your kind has spread across your solar system. You build machines, explore space, and call yourselves advanced. Yet you cower in fear before us. Prove your worth. Fight. If you refuse, you are unworthy and will be erased. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Erased. Did it mean destroyed? The thought sent a wave of panic through the crowd, but Ethan kept his composure. He glanced back at Laura, who looked pale and shaken. She gave him a small nod, urging him to keep going. What happens if we win? Ethan asked carefully. Paused, as if considering the question. If you defeat us, you earn our respect. If you fail, it let the sentence hang unfinished, the implication clear enough. Ethan swallowed hard. This wasn't just a threat, it was a test, and failure meant extinction. As Zoreth turned and walked back into its ship, the opening sealed shut behind it. The shimmering surface returned to its original state, as if nothing had happened. For several moments, no one moved. The soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, their faces pale. The scientists exchanged worried glances, muttering quietly among themselves. Ethan stared at the ship, his mind racing. How could humanity possibly fight against something so advanced? They didn't stand a chance. But surrendering wasn't an option either, not if it meant being wiped out entirely. Laura approached him, her hands trembling as she clutched her notebook. This changes everything, she whispered. If they're telling the truth, we're dealing with a species that sees conflict as some kind of game, a test of strength. Ethan nodded grimly. And we're the latest contestants. He sighed, rubbing his temples. We need to tell the others. Prepare for whatever comes next. Word of the encounter spread quickly. By nightfall, news outlets around the world were reporting on the alien visitor and its chilling demand. People gathered in streets and living rooms, watching broadcasts and debating what to do. Some argued for immediate surrender, believing resistance would only lead to disaster. Others called for defiance, insisting that humanity couldn't give up without a fight. In the midst of the chaos, Ethan found himself at the center of it all. General Monroe, the highest-ranking officer on site, ordered him to act as the liaison between the military and the scientific team. It was a daunting task, but Ethan accepted it without hesitation. Someone had to take charge, and he knew it might as well be him. That evening, as he sat alone in his tent, Ethan stared at the alien ship in the distance. Its glow illuminated the dark desert like a second moon. He thought about Zoreth's words, and wondered if humanity truly had what it took to survive. Could they rise to the challenge, or would they crumble under the weight of their own fears? One thing was certain, the days ahead would decide the fate of the entire human race, and Ethan Carter intended to do everything in his power to ensure they didn't go down without a fight. End of part 1. ****, the alien demanded Warthin, the human promised annihilation. HFY, the news of Zorath's demand spread like wildfire across the globe. By morning, every person on Earth knew about the alien's arrival and its chilling ultimatum, war or annihilation. Panic gripped cities as people debated what to do next. Some argued that humanity should surrender immediately, believing resistance would only lead to destruction. Others insisted on fighting back, convinced that giving up meant certain doom. In Washington, D.C., world leaders gathered for an emergency meeting. The United Nations headquarters buzzed with activity as representatives from every nation poured in. Ethan Carter sat at the edge of the room, feeling out of place among the powerful figures who now looked to him for guidance. His role as the liaison between the military and scientists, had suddenly made him one of the most important people in the room. Dr. Laura Bennett stood beside him, clutching a tablet filled with data she'd collected during their brief encounter with Zor. Her face was pale but determined. She leaned closer to Ethan and whispered, "This isn't just about winning or losing. If we fight, we need to understand why they're doing this. There has to be more to it." Ethan nodded slowly. He knew. She was right, but time wasn't on their side. Zorith hadn't given them a deadline, but everyone understood the clock was ticking. Every second wasted meant less preparation for whatever horrors the Xyrans might unleash. One by one, leaders took turns speaking. Some called for surrender, claiming humanity couldn't possibly stand against such advanced beings. Others argued passionately for defiance, pointing out that surrender wouldn't save them, it would only delay the inevitable. The argument grew heated, voices rising until General Monroe slammed his fist on the table to silence the room. "We don't have the luxury of division," he barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "If we want to survive, we need to act as one. That means making decisions based on facts, not fear." He turned to Ethan. "Lieutenant Carter, tell us what you know." All eyes shifted to Ethan. For a moment, he felt frozen under the weight of their stares. Then he cleared his throat and began, choosing his words carefully. "From what we've observed, the Xyrans are far more advanced than us. Their technology is beyond anything we've seen before. But there's something else. They seem to view war as some kind of test, a way to measure whether a species is worthy." The room fell silent as his words sank in. Laura stepped forward, holding up her tablet. "I've been analyzing the symbols on their ship. They appear to follow a complex mathematical pattern, which suggests their society values logic and efficiency above all else. This challenge may be part of their culture. They might see conflict as a natural step in interacting with other civilizations." A representative from Japan raised his hand hesitantly. "But why? Why would they come here just to declare war? What do they gain from destroying us?" Laura hesitated, glancing at Ethan before answering. "That's the question we need to answer. Based on Zorith's behavior, I believe they're testing us, not just our strength, but our resolve. If we refuse to fight, they'll see us as weak and eliminate us. But if we fight back..." She trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. Ethan picked up where she left off. "If we fight back, we prove ourselves. Whether that guarantees survival, I can't say, but it's our best chance." The debate resumed, but this time with a clearer focus. Slowly, reluctantly, the leaders began to agree on a plan. Humanity would accept Zorith's challenge, but not blindly. They would prepare as much as possible, using every resource available to level the playing field. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only option they had. Back in Nevada, work began immediately. Factories that once produced cars and electronics were repurposed to build weapons and ships. Engineers worked around the clock, trying to reverse engineer the fragments of Xyran tech recovered from the crash site. Soldiers trained harder than ever before, drilling for scenarios no one could fully predict. Ethan coordinated efforts alongside Laura, who spent most of her time buried in research. Together, they formed a team of experts tasked with finding weaknesses in the Xyrans' technology. Every day brought new challenges, but also small victories. A breakthrough in understanding the aliens' energy signatures led to the development of experimental EMP devices. Another discovery revealed that the Xyrans' shields were vulnerable to specific frequencies. Despite these advances, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Not everyone believed humanity stood a chance. Protests erupted in major cities, with crowds chanting slogans like "No more war" and "Save our planet." Even within the military, doubts lingered. Some soldiers questioned whether their efforts were futile, while others struggled with the moral implications of fighting an enemy they barely understood. Ethan saw the cracks forming and did his best to hold everything together. He visited troops regularly, offering encouragement and reminding them why they were fighting. "This isn't just about us," he told them during one particularly grueling training session. "It's about everyone back home, the families, the children, the future. We owe it to them to try." Laura, meanwhile, wrestled with her own fears. Late at night, when the rest of the team had gone to bed, she stayed up poring over data. Her mind raced with questions. Why had the Xyrans chosen Earth? Was this truly a test? Or was there another motive behind their actions? And what would happen if humanity failed? One evening, as she stared at the glowing screen of her laptop, Ethan entered the tent. He carried 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her without a word. She accepted it gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "You look exhausted," he said gently. "I feel exhausted," she admitted, letting out a long sigh. "Sometimes I wonder if we're chasing answers that don't exist. What if we're wrong about them? What if this isn't a test at all?" Ethan sat down beside her, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "We can't afford to think like that. Right now, we have to assume the worst and prepare for it. If we're wrong, great. But if we're right..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Laura nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "There's something else bothering me," she confessed after a pause. "Zorath said they seek worthy adversaries. What does that really mean? Are we supposed to impress them? Or are they looking for an excuse to destroy us?" Ethan frowned, considering the question. Maybe both. "Either way, we can't let them dictate the terms. If they want to fight, we'll give them one, but on our terms." Over the next few weeks, preparations intensified. New strategies were developed, combining traditional military tactics with cutting-edge technology. Laura proposed using quantum computing to simulate battles against the Xyrans, allowing them to anticipate potential moves. Ethan supported the idea wholeheartedly, knowing they needed every advantage they could get. As the days passed, Ethan found himself growing closer to Laura. They worked side by side, sharing ideas and leaning on each other during moments of doubt. Though neither of them spoke about it openly, a bond formed between them, a quiet understanding born from shared responsibility and mutual respect. But even as progress was made, shadows loomed on the horizon. Reports trickled in of strange phenomena occurring near Jupiter's orbit. Ships reported seeing flashes of light and detecting unusual energy readings. Scientists speculated that the Xyrans were amassing their forces, preparing for the next phase of their campaign. Ethan received the news during a late-night briefing. He listened silently as technicians explained the findings, his jaw tightening with each detail. When they finished, he turned to Laura, who looked just as grim as he felt. "They're coming," he said simply. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the same mix of fear and determination he saw in his own reflection. "And when they do, we'll be ready." Outside, the alien ship still stood in the desert, its shimmering surface catching the moonlight. To many, it was a symbol of terror, an unwelcome visitor threatening humanity's existence. To Ethan and Laura, it represented something else entirely, a challenge they refused to back down from. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: humanity wouldn't go quietly into the night. They would fight, tooth and nail, for their right to survive. And if the Xyrans wanted war, they would learn exactly what humans were capable of. End of Part 2. The alien demanded, war then the human promised annihilation. HFY As humanity prepared for the looming conflict, tensions grew thicker with each passing day. The world had never been so united or so divided. While governments and scientists worked tirelessly to strengthen Earth's defenses, ordinary people struggled to cope with the reality of an alien threat. Fear spread like a shadow over cities and towns, casting doubt on whether humanity could truly stand against such overwhelming odds. Ethan Carter felt the weight of it all, pressing down on him. Every decision he made, every order he gave, carried consequences that could shape the future or end it. He spent long hours in meetings with military leaders, strategists, and engineers, trying to piece together a plan that might give humanity a fighting chance. But no matter how much progress they made, there was always the nagging question, would it be enough? Laura Bennett shared his concerns. She spent her days buried in research, analyzing every scrap of information they had about her lab became a second home, cluttered with papers, screens displaying complex equations, and prototypes of experimental weapons. Despite her exhaustion, she refused to slow down. "We don't have time to rest," she told Ethan one night as they reviewed data together. "Every second counts." Their bond deepened as they worked side by side, sharing not just ideas, but also moments of vulnerability. Late at night, when the rest of the team had gone to sleep, they often talked about what drove them to keep going. For Ethan, it was the faces of the soldiers under his command, the men and women who trusted him to lead them into battle. For Laura, it was the thought of her younger brother, Daniel, who lived back in Chicago. "I can't let him grow up in a world where we didn't even try to fight," she said softly, her voice trembling. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're doing everything we can. That's all anyone can ask of us." Despite their determination, cracks began to show in humanity's resolve. Protests erupted in major cities, with crowds shouting slogans like, "No more war," and "Save our planet." Some argued that resisting the Xyrans would only provoke them further, while others believed surrender was the only way to avoid destruction. Social media buzzed with debates, conspiracy theories, and calls for peace or rebellion. It was chaos not just in the streets, but in people's minds. Even within the military, doubts lingered. Soldiers questioned whether their efforts were futile, given the vast technological gap between humans and the Xyrans. During training exercises, Ethan noticed a shift in morale. Once eager and determined, some troops now seemed hesitant, unsure if their sacrifices would make any difference. He knew he had to address it before despair took hold. One evening, after a particularly grueling drill, Ethan gathered the soldiers around him. They stood in the desert heat, sweat dripping from their foreheads, their uniforms dusty and worn. He looked at each of them, meeting their eyes one by one. "I know you're scared," he began, his voice steady, despite the knot in his stomach. "I am too. This isn't going to be easy. But remember this, we're not fighting because we think we'll win easily. We're fighting because we have something worth protecting. Our families, our homes, our future, those are things worth dying for." His words resonated with the group. A few nodded silently, while others straightened, their posture, determination flickering back into their expressions. Ethan felt a small sense of relief. At least for now, he'd managed to reignite their spirit. Meanwhile, Laura made a breakthrough that could change everything. After weeks of studying the Xyrans' energy signatures, she discovered a pattern of flaw in their shielding technology. The shields were nearly impenetrable, but they faltered briefly during certain types of energy discharges. If humanity could exploit this weakness, they might stand a chance in combat. Excited, she rushed to share the news with Ethan. "It's not perfect," she admitted, spreading out diagrams and charts across the table. "But if we time our attacks carefully, we can disable their ships temporarily. It won't destroy them outright, but it'll give us an opening." Ethan studied the data, his mind racing with possibilities. "This is exactly what we need," he said, a spark of hope igniting within him. "We'll adapt our EMP devices to target those specific frequencies. It's risky, but it's better than nothing." With renewed focus, the team worked around the clock to implement Laura's findings. Engineers modified existing weapons, adding modules designed to emit bursts of energy at precise intervals. Pilots practiced new maneuvers, learning how to coordinate attacks to maximize the impact of the EMPs. Everyone understood the stakes if This didn't work. Humanity's chances of survival would drop drastically as preparations continued. Strange reports began filtering in from space. Observatories detected unusual activity near Jupiter's orbit, flashes of light, massive energy surges, and movements suggesting the presence of alien fleets. Scientists speculated that the Xi were gathering their forces, preparing for their next move. Ethan received the update during a briefing. His heart sank as he listened to the details. The aliens weren't wasting time. They were coming sooner than expected. When the presentation ended, he turned to Laura, who looked pale but resolute. "They're moving faster than we thought," he said grimly. "We don't have much time left." She nodded, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Then we need to act faster too. Whatever happens, we have to hold our ground." In the days that followed, the pace of work accelerated. Supplies poured into the Nevada base, and reinforcements arrived from across the globe. The air buzzed with urgency, every person aware that the final showdown was approaching. Even the alien ship in the distance seemed to hum with anticipation, its surface shimmering faintly under the sun. Ethan found himself reflecting on the journey so far. From the moment Zoroth stepped out of that ship, demanding war, his life had changed irrevocably. He'd gone from being an ordinary officer to a key figure in humanity's fight for survival. It wasn't a role he'd asked for, but one he accepted, without hesitation. And though fear lurked in the corners of his mind, he refused to let it consume him. One night, as he walked through the camp, he stopped to watch the stars. They twinkled above, distant and untouchable, reminding him of how small humanity truly was in the grand scheme of the universe. Yet even in their insignificance, humans had always found ways to persevere, to dream, to create, to fight for what mattered most. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," he murmured aloud, though no one was there to hear him. "We're fighting for everyone who ever looked up at the sky and wondered what was out there." Behind him, Laura approached quietly. She stood beside him, gazing at the stars as well. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I don't know. But I do know this. If we go down, we'll go down swinging." Her lips curved into a small, tired smile. "That's good enough for me." Together, they stood in silence, drawing strength from each other as the weight of the coming battle settled over them. Tomorrow, they would face whatever horrors awaited them in the vastness of space. Tonight, they allowed themselves a brief moment of peace, knowing it might be their last, far away, beyond the reaches of Earth's atmosphere. The Zyran fleet moved closer, their intentions clear. Humanity had been given a choice: fight or perish. And as dawn broke over the Nevada desert, Ethan and Laura prepared to give their answer. End of Part 3. The alien demanded warmth, then the human promised annihilation. HFY the day humanity had been dreading finally arrived. Reports confirmed that the Zyran fleet was moving closer to Earth, their ships forming a massive armada near Jupiter's orbit. Observatories captured images of glowing vessels stretching across the sky, their sheer size dwarfing anything humans had ever built. Panic surged once again as news outlets broadcasted updates, showing blurry footage of the alien ships and speculating about what might happen next. Ethan Carter stood in the command center, staring at the screens displaying real-time data from space. His hands were clasped tightly behind his back, his knuckles white from the pressure. Around him, technicians and officers worked furiously, monitoring every movement of the enemy fleet. The air was thick with tension, filled with the hum of machines and the occasional burst of static from communication channels. Laura Bennett sat nearby, her eyes glued to her laptop as she analyzed the latest readings. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, running simulations and cross-referencing energy patterns. Despite her calm exterior, Ethan could see the worry etched into her face. They both knew this wasn't just another drill. It was the moment they'd spent weeks preparing for. General Monroe entered the room, his boots clicking against the tiled floor. He glanced at the screens, then turned to Ethan. "Status report," he barked, his tone sharp but controlled. Ethan stepped forward, clearing his throat. "The Zyrans are holding position near Jupiter. Based on their trajectory, they'll reach Earth within 72 hours. Their numbers are overwhelming." "How many?" Monroe asked, his jaw tightening. "At least 300 ships," Ethan replied. "Possibly more. We're still trying to get an accurate count." Monroe let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "That's not good. Not good at all." He turned to Laura. "What about the EMP devices? Are they ready?" She nodded quickly, though her expression remained cautious. "Yes, sir. We've modified them to target the specific frequencies we identified earlier. If everything goes according to plan, they should disrupt the Zyrans' shields for 10 to 15 seconds. That's our window." 10 to 15 seconds, Monroe muttered, rubbing his temples. "It'll have to do." "What about our forces?" "Our fleet is assembled and ready," Ethan answered. "We've divided them into strike teams, each equipped with EMP modules. Pilots have been briefed on the new tactics, and ground support is standing by." Monroe gave a curt nod. "Good. Make sure everyone knows their roles. Once those bastards hit our airspace, there won't be time for second chances." "Yes, sir," Ethan said, saluting briefly before returning to his station. As the general left the room, Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. 72 hours. That was all the time they had left. He glanced at Laura, who was typing furiously, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She looked up, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine, just making sure we didn't miss anything." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've done everything you can. Now, it's up to us to make it work." She nodded, though her eyes betrayed her lingering doubts. "Let's hope so." Over the next 2 days, activity reached a fever pitch. Factories churned out weapons and supplies non-stop, while engineers worked tirelessly to upgrade existing technology. Troops boarded ships bound for orbiting stations, where they would join the fleet awaiting orders. Back on Earth, civilians prepared for the worst. Stocking up on essentials and seeking shelter, Ethan spent most of his time coordinating logistics, ensuring every piece of equipment and every soldier was in position. He visited the troops regularly, offering words of encouragement and answering questions as best he could. Many of the soldiers were young, barely out of training, and their faces reflected a mix of fear and determination. Ethan saw himself in them, the same uncertainty, the same drive to protect what mattered most. One evening, as he walked through the barracks, he stopped to speak with a young private named Ryan. The kid couldn't have been older than 20, his uniform slightly too big for his wiry frame. When Ethan approached, Ryan snapped to attention, his salute crisp and precise, at ease. "Private," Ethan said, gesturing for him to relax. "How are you holding up?" Ryan hesitated, glancing at the ground before meeting Ethan's gaze. "I'm nervous, sir. I mean, what if we mess up? What if we don't stop them?" Ethan crouched down to meet him at eye level. "Listen to me, Ryan. Fear is normal. It means you care. But remember this, you're not alone. Every person out there is counting on you, just like you're counting on them. Together, we'll get through this." Ryan swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Yes, sir. That's the spirit," Ethan said, giving him a pat on the shoulder. As he walked away, he felt a pang of guilt. He wanted to believe his own words, but deep down, he knew how slim their chances were. On the 3rd day, the Zyrans made their move. Early in the morning, alarms blared throughout the base, signaling the arrival of the alien fleet. Screens lit up with images of glowing ships descending toward Earth, their shapes cutting through the atmosphere like knives. The sight was breathtaking and terrifying. Ethan rushed to the command center, where chaos reigned. Officers shouted orders, technicians scrambled to track the invaders, and pilots prepared for launch. Laura was already there, her face pale but focused as she monitored the situation. "They're heading straight for Europa," she announced, pointing at the screen. "Looks like they're testing us." "Europa," Ethan frowned. "Why there?" "It's strategic," Laura explained. "They know we have outposts there. If they take those out, they'll cripple our ability to launch counterattacks." Ethan cursed under his breath. "We can't let that happen. Order Strike Team Alpha to intercept. Use the EMPs as soon as they're in range." "Yes, sir," an officer replied, relaying the command. Within minutes, human ships launched from orbiting stations, racing toward Europa to engage the enemy. Ethan watched anxiously as the battle unfolded on the monitors. The Zyran ships moved with eerie precision, their movements fluid and coordinated. Energy beams lashed out, striking human vessels with devastating force. Several ships exploded instantly, their crews lost in an instant. But Strike Team Alpha pressed forward, dodging attacks and positioning themselves carefully. At the right moment, they activated the EMP devices. A pulse of energy surged outward, hitting the lead Zyran ship. For a brief moment, its shield flickered and vanished, leaving it exposed. "Now," Ethan shouted, gripping the edge of the table. Human fighters seized the opportunity, firing missiles directly at the unprotected hull. The alien ship erupted, in flames, breaking apart into shards of metal. Cheers erupted in the command center, but they were short-lived. The remaining Zyran ships regrouped quickly, their shields restored. They retaliated with overwhelming force, obliterating several human ships in retaliation. The victory came at a heavy cost. Ethan clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him. "Damn it. We did it though," Laura said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "We proved we can hurt them. That's something." He nodded grimly, knowing she was right. They had struck a blow, but it wouldn't be enough. The Zyran were still far stronger, their numbers seemingly endless. Humanity had shown courage and ingenuity, but survival required more than that. It required strategy, sacrifice, and maybe even miracles, as the surviving ships retreated. Ethan turned to address the team. "Good work, everyone. We've learned valuable lessons today. Analyze the data, refine our tactics, and prepare for the next engagement. This isn't over yet." His words echoed through the room, met with nods of determination. Despite the losses, morale remained intact. Everyone understood the stakes, and they refused to give up. Far above, the Zyrans regrouped, their glowing eyes fixed on Earth. Zorath observed the skirmish with cold detachment, unimpressed by humanity's efforts. Yet somewhere deep within, its alien mind, a spark of curiosity ignited. Perhaps these fragile beings weren't as weak as they appeared, back on Earth. Ethan stared at the screens, watching the alien fleet retreat temporarily. He knew this was only the beginning. The real battle lay ahead, and humanity would need every ounce of strength to survive. End of Part 4. ***, the alien demanded war then, the human promised annihilation. HFY ***, the aftermath of the Europa skirmish left humanity shaken but not broken. Though they had managed to destroy one Zyran ship, the cost had been devastating. Dozens of human vessels were lost, along with hundreds of brave men and women who had given their lives in the fight. The victory felt hollow, a fleeting triumph, overshadowed by grief and uncertainty. Ethan Carter stood in the command center, his eyes fixed on the screens, displaying the damage reports. Each name on the casualty list weighed heavily on him, a reminder of the sacrifices made in the name of survival. He clenched his fists tightly, trying to push aside the guilt that threatened to overwhelm him. These people had trusted him to lead the band. Now they were gone. Laura Bennett sat nearby, her face pale and drawn. She had spent hours analyzing the data from the battle, searching for any clues that might improve their chances next time. Her laptop was open, filled with graphs and charts, detailing the performance of the EMP devices and the Zyron's response. Despite her exhaustion, she refused to stop working. They adapted quickly, she said finally, breaking the silence. After we disabled that first ship, the others adjusted their tactics almost immediately. Their shields became harder to penetrate. Ethan nodded grimly. They're learning from us. That's not good. No, it's not, Laura agreed. But we can learn from them too. Look at this. She pointed to a graph showing energy fluctuations during the battle. When their shields faltered, there was a brief spike in neural activity. I think their ships are connected through some kind of hive mind system. If we disrupt that connection, Ethan leaned closer, studying the graph intently. You're saying we could cripple their entire fleet by targeting their communication network? Exactly, Laura replied, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. It's risky though. We'd need to get close enough to deploy the EMPs directly into their systems. And even then, we might only have seconds before they recover. Ethan straightened, his mind racing with possibilities. It was a long shot, but it was the best idea they had so far. Start modifying the EMPs to focus on neural frequencies, he ordered. We'll need every available engineer on this. Time is running out. Yes, sir, Laura said, already typing furiously on her keyboard. As the team scrambled to implement the new strategy, Ethan turned his attention to the survivors of the Europa battle. Many were injured, physically and emotionally scarred by what they had witnessed. He visited the medical bay, where doctors worked tirelessly to treat burns, fractures, and other wounds sustained during the fight. Soldiers lay in beds, their faces pale and haunted. One of them, a young pilot named Sarah, caught his eye. She was barely conscious, her body wrapped in bandages, but she managed a weak smile when she saw him approach. Ethan pulled up a chair beside her bed and sat down. How are you holding up? He asked gently. I've been better, Sarah joked, though her voice was hoarse. Sir, did we do okay? Did we make a difference? Ethan hesitated, unsure how to answer. Finally, he said, you did more than okay. You proved that we can fight back. Without you and your team, we wouldn't have learned half of what we know now. Sarah nodded faintly, closing her eyes, as if the effort of speaking had drained her. Ethan stayed by her side for a few more minutes, offering quiet words of encouragement before moving on to check on the others. Each soldier he spoke to reminded him why they were fighting, not just for themselves, but for everyone counting on them back home, back in the command center. Progress on the modified EMPs continued at a frantic pace. Engineers worked around the clock, testing prototypes and making adjustments based on Laura's calculations. By the end of the day, the first batch of upgraded devices was ready for deployment. General Monroe called an emergency meeting to discuss the next steps. The room buzzed with tension as officers and scientists gathered, their expressions reflecting a mix of hope and dread. Ethan stood at the front, addressing the group. We've identified a potential weakness in the systems, he began, projecting images of the neural frequency graphs onto the wall. Their ships rely on a hive mind network to coordinate attacks. If we can disrupt that connection, we might be able to disable multiple ships at once. Monroe studied the graphs carefully, his brow furrowed. How confident are we in this plan? It's not foolproof, Laura admitted, stepping forward. But it's our best chance. The EMPs will need to be deployed at close range, which means putting our pilots in extreme danger. Even then, the window of opportunity will be short, probably less than 10 seconds. Monroe nodded slowly, weighing the risks. After a moment, he turned to Ethan. Lieutenant Carter, I'm leaving this in your hands. Choose your strike teams wisely. Make sure everyone knows exactly what's expected of them. Yes, sir, Ethan replied, saluting briefly as the meeting broke up. Ethan returned to his station, where Laura was waiting anxiously. "We're doing this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This could be at the turning point." "It has to be," Ethan said firmly. "We don't have another option." Over the next 24 hours, preparations intensified. Pilots trained rigorously, practicing maneuvers designed to bring them within range of the Zyran ships without getting obliterated. Ground crews loaded the modified EMPs onto fighters, double-checking every detail to ensure nothing went wrong. Back in the command center, strategists plotted courses and simulated scenarios, looking for ways to maximize their chances of success. Ethan visited the pilots personally, briefing them on the mission and answering their questions. Many were nervous, but none backed down. One of them, a veteran named Chris, approached him after the briefing. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" Chris asked, his tone respectful, but firm. "Of course," Ethan replied. "If this works, it'll buy us time, but it won't win the war. What happens after? How do we keep pushing forward?" Ethan met his gaze steadily. "For now, all we can do is take it one step at a time. Today, we focus on surviving. Tomorrow, we figure out how to win." Chris nodded, satisfied with the answer. "Understood, sir." Finally, the moment came. Early the following morning, alarms blared throughout the base as sensors detected movement in the Zyran fleet. The aliens were advancing again, this time heading straight for Earth's moon. Screens lit up with images of glowing ships descending toward Luna Colony, their intent clear, to wipe out humanity's last line of defense. Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "This is it," he announced over the comms channel. "Strike teams, Bravo and Charlie, launch immediately. Follow the designated routes and deploy the EMPs as planned. Good luck, everyone." The hangar doors slid open, revealing a sky filled with stars. Fighters roared to life, their engines rumbling like thunder as they shot into space. Ethan watched from the command center, his heart pounding as the battle unfolded on the monitors. The Zyrans moved with terrifying efficiency, their plasma cannons obliterating anything in their path. Human ships darted between debris fields, dodging attacks while closing in on their targets. Strike Team Bravo reached the first wave of enemy vessels, deploying the modified EMPs at close range. A pulse of energy surged outward, hitting the Zyrans' shields and disrupting their neural network. For a split second, chaos erupted among the alien fleet. Ships veered off course, colliding with each other as their coordination faltered. Human fighters seized the opportunity, firing missiles into the confusion. Several Zyran ships exploded spectacularly, sending shockwaves rippling through space. Cheers erupted in the command center, but Ethan remained focused. "Don't let up," he shouted. "Keep pushing." Strike Team Charlie followed suit, targeting a second cluster of Zyran ships. Again, the EMPs worked, disabling their shields and creating openings for attack. More alien vessels fell, their glowing hulls shattering into fragments, but the Zyrans weren't defeated yet. Within moments, their systems began to stabilize, their shields reactivating as the neural network repaired itself. They retaliated with overwhelming force, blasting human ships out of existence. The screen flickered as Strike Team Bravo's signal disappeared entirely. Ethan slammed his fist against the table, frustration boiling inside him. "Damn it! They're regrouping," Laura shouted, pointing at the monitors. "They're coming back stronger. We need reinforcements." Ethan barked into the comms. "All available units, converge on Sector 7. Hold the line." More human ships joined the fray, pouring everything they had into the fight. Explosions lit up the void of space, painting the battlefield with fire and smoke. For every Zyran ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Despite the odds, humanity held on. Slowly but surely, they pushed the alien fleet back, forcing them to retreat temporarily. When the dust settled, the surviving human ships limped home, battered but victorious, Ethan sank into his chair, exhaustion washing over him. They had done it, they had struck a significant blow against the Warrens, but he knew the war was far from over. Zoroth and its kind would return, angrier and more determined than ever. Back on Earth, Ethan stared at the screens, watching the alien fleet withdraw. He allowed himself a brief moment of relief, knowing they had earned a reprieve but not victory. The road ahead would be long and brutal.